Welcome to Leading for Wellness. I'm Liesl Bernard, CEO of Cologne Executive Search and Leading for Wellness events. Each week, we dive into the journeys of visionary wellness entrepreneurs, uncovering their secrets to success. Get ready for insightful conversations that will inspire you to elevate your business and prioritize your well-being. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of Leading for Wellness. I'm thrilled today to introduce a true force of nature in India's nutraceutical and wellness ingredient space, someone that has a deep background in technology, pharmaceutical research, leadership, and a business acumen like few others. Rajat Mittal Shah is the co-founder of Nutriventia, as well as the founder of Nature and Thought, a nature-inspired brand based in India. Welcome, Rashad.
Thank you, Liesl. Very glad to be on Leading for Wellness. And absolutely don't worry about getting my name right. I am called Rajat, one of these variations. So it's all good.
I have a very unusual name, so most people struggle with my name as well. So thank you for that, for the kindness there. I would love to start off by you telling a little bit about your background and what you're currently doing.
Liesl, I would like to start off right from the beginning. So I was born in the 1980s in India, early 1980s, where first of all, female child genocide was quite common, but also, female child was not necessarily educated very well. In fact, our government had free education for women up till a certain age to promote that education. Fortunately for me, I was lucky. My parents really emphasized education, but emphasized education to another level where if I didn't study and I didn't do well, I was constantly threatened to be married. So the threat was very real for me. I did my undergrad here in computer science. I traveled to the United States to do my master's in computer science and engineering. and really, that's where my entrepreneurial journey started. I started developing solutions for universities. And I realized quite early that I had a natural, a skill for doing this, but also that's kind of what really excited me, solving problems. So started by building a LinkedIn type solution years ahead of when LinkedIn even existed. For universities in the United States, I worked there for quite a few years. Did my MBA in business administration, and marriage happened. Decided, couldn't stay away from family for that long, and moved back to India about a few years ago, and joined my pharma business. And the pharma business gave me a completely different lens to look at, in terms of rigor, in terms of placing evidence before marketing, um, quality systems. And that was, I think, a turning point for me to kind of see a different side, having worked in academia for so many years in the United States, now coming to India and working in pharma. But what was very interesting was the boardrooms were different, the people were different, and the culture was also extremely different. So while I was given a seat at the table, I was not necessarily given the microphone. And from there, went ahead and incorporated Nutriventia, which is a science-backed ingredient supplier out of India. We borrowed from our pharma legacy the rigor, the quality, the focus on evidence, and at the same time, kind of use that creative landscape to really try to solve consumer problems. So the mission kind of remained the same to solve problems, but the industry kept finding me the platform to exercise it.
Amazing. What an incredible start. I sense there's a deeper mission behind what you do, and especially, in the nutraceutical space. Where did that start for you?
Okay, so that's actually touching a very personal story. Um, Way back when I was quite educated, of course, understood things. And my father was diagnosed with progressive supranuclear palsy, an extremely rare condition. And the only solution, there were no drugs, of course, to cure his disease, but the only rescue or hope we had was with supplements. And much like any, average consumer in the United States, I was just picking up supplements based on, more the milligrams, the more the efficacy kind of fallacy, which of course, I know now is not necessarily true. Also, very important that I realized during this journey is that my father decided on his own that, hey, the costs are really rising for my treatment. I'm going to make sure that if I had to take 3 capsules a day, I'm going to take 1 capsule. And I think when you think about that, that's your average consumer. That's kind of what is the real problem consumers are facing today. And that's really what I have tried along with my co founder, who's also my life partner, by the way, in trying to solve. We're trying to make sure that every solution is something, whether it's me, my child, my in laws, my extended family, friends and family, and any consumer. The treatment kind of should remain the same. I would like to make sure that every consumer doesn't feel pinched in taking the product. They're regular with their product. It's easy and it is science backed so they can see the results. And the quality of the product is something they can trust. And that's really the foundation on which Nutriventia is based.
Oh, that's fascinating.
And yeah, and just fast forwarding it to last year, I lost my mom to spinal ataxia last year. So this is kind of a recurrent theme in my life. And I want to definitely get ahead of the problem so that more solutions like this are accessible as early interventions for people where it can change, their life and not just their life, knowing from personal experience, the life of a lot of people around them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think the nutraceutical industry as is at an interesting crossroads at the moment,
Mm.
between ancient wisdom, modern science, and a consumer that's more informed and have access to information. What is your vision of where the industry needs to go?
I believe that the industry really needs to make sure that the evidence is real. And when you're talking about a consumer, we're really keeping their problems at the heart of every solution. So let's not, I know that today gummies are the rage. We also design our ingredients for gummies. But at the same time, once you get past that trial and kind of the fun aspect of it, capsules really are your mainstay. And that's where you're making sure you're getting the right dose, you're taking it regularly. The seriousness kind of automatically does come in. And also, when you think, it's a great segue into talking about also that the fact that the majority of your consumers today that are shopping for these products are women. But the science has kind of not done justice to giving them products that make sense for them. So, really trying to solve that problem is where the industry needs to focus. At Nutriventia, we follow a very rigorous process. And for instance, I'll give you a slightly boring example, but we have a turmeric, which is, I could have made it like any other turmeric, take it 3 times a day, add some pepper into it, improve bioavailability. But what we did was very drastically different, and we were a very small voice in a very noisy marketplace. But we are starting to see success, and we are hearing consumer stories about how the product's changing their life. It's a small 250 milligram dose. It's Clean Label Project certified. We have more than 6 to 7 studies already to back it in terms of its clinical efficacy. And this is what we want to be able
Wow.
to repeat, and we are repeating across the board for every single product. So, designing for women, designing with them in mind, designing for real consumer problems is where I really think the industry needs to shine, and keeping delivery technologies as your platform. That's another major element that we have borrowed from our pharma legacy. How to solve for delivery, how to make something truly bioavailable that reduces dose, how to make something sustainably so you don't have to take it 2 or 3 times a day, how to
Mhm.
make something taste masked. Um, these are real solutions, quite advanced technology that is available in other industries. And bringing that to nutraceutical has kind of been our mission and our guiding force.
Yeah, it seems like deliverability, the technology behind that, and the sustained release is such a prominent feature that we're seeing more and more in the nutraceutical industry. And I think those ingredients are definitely going to be more sought after as we continue. I want to switch a little bit, and speaking about leadership, you're a candidate for women in nutraceuticals for the board of directors. The voting that's coming up soon, and this is a particular meaningful moment. I think in your career and also for Wind, you're the only candidate that is running in the APAC region. And I want to ask you why Win, and why do you think it matters to have a candidate, in the APAC region on the board?
So, why win? I think the answer for it is kind of very evident in the story I've told you so far.
Hmm.
Right? I'm always like, go women, of course, but there are some real metrics at play here. Only 28% of companies in the nutraceutical space have women in leadership positions at the top, at the board. The number drops drastically the bigger the company is, to almost 13%. And we know that, again, and these are research numbers, I'm not making this stuff up, that the more diverse the board is, the better performance you get. And I live this example on a daily basis. Nutriventia has been founded by myself and my husband. We both play to our strengths. We are not trying to compete or add or subtract. We're really multiplying things together. And I think that makes a real difference. And if you think about it, there are certain qualities that women by default bring to the table. There are certain qualities that men by default bring to the table. And I think there is no trying to create, equality there. I think it's more about equity and it's about creating a meaningful difference. So, a couple of years ago, when was just about to kick off, I immediately said, guys, this is not just a problem in the United States. The industry is global. The amount of suppliers and folks out of India that, whether it is attending shows or who are central to this industry, who are innovating, are from this region. I want India to be a part of this somehow. And I guess what I said kind of struck a chord. In less than a year of when taking off, we launched the first global chapter in India, and I was the founding global liaison for India. However, I failed miserably. Okay. And I think it's extremely important to know that because I was quite isolated here in India and I was kind of trying to run things. I didn't know how to really create value for the members here when everything's happening back in the United States for the major part or at any large international show. So, what could I do differently? I could only make an impact where I could. So I worked with the board and we got the membership fees for India down. And that's extremely important because the economic difference, the
Hmm.
currency values are extremely different in these two countries. So that was my win. But there were lots of failures, like I said. And I also realized that this is not it's not a one person sport, it is a team sport. So when I was asked to take the lead for APAC as a co-chair, along with Gillian Fish, who you're also very familiar with, um, I was like, guys, are you all sure? I have done a horrible job so far. Membership's not supremely up. Yes, we're doing a little bit. Yeah, it's tiny steps, but it is nowhere close to the success in this region. And so for the last 9 months, so they did still bring me on. So I hope that does happen a second time around when we talk about the board. But at the same time, Now I had a partner in crime, and we started thinking about how do we grow APAC. The last 9 months, we have already recruited about 7 different national chairs across 3 different countries. We are trying to create systems, but it is still extremely siloed. A lot of the activities, a lot of the systems, a lot of the ways of working are still designed for the Western world. The problems are for the Western world. I just recently did an article about, why should APAC really have a seat at the table?
Mm.
And I think that's because, I have had experiences in boardrooms on both sides of the world. And the problems are extremely different. What people want here could be very different from what people could want in other parts of the world. And maybe the problem and what we're trying to solve for is the same, though. But the problem is more pronounced here in APAC. The number of women in leadership positions is far lower than that in the United States. So I think there's something really impactful that can be done using WIN as a platform in this part of the world. And more importantly, I think it's about, even if it's the same programs, the delivery will have to be different,
Mhm.
right? The economic reality of individuals is extremely different. And I think that's where my motivation for this region comes from. Having served in this region for now almost 3 years, I believe I have a very good lens into what can happen. So running for wins board position is really about giving APAC that voice so that it is not just following, but it is also being part of the leading and what needs to change. Because, like I told you earlier, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Mhm.
So I really want to be that change and see how we can scale when to new heights. And the other aspect of my experience comes from the years I have spent developing software systems in the IT world, in my position as a CIO for a pharma company. I'm extremely systems oriented. You give me a problem, I'll find a system to solve it. So that in itself can be a huge asset that I can bring. And that's not, honestly, the combination of science and tech is not that easy to find in this
It's very
industry.
unusual. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
so I think I can play to my strengths and help everybody, not just APAC, but other individuals and members and board members and committees in the other parts of the world, to bring in more efficiencies, to think about how we can use AI to even do things at scale. I'm actually just starting to pursue my doctorate in generative AI applications, business applications. So, because you can't stop learning, right? I'm a student for life. And that's where I think, again, how can we think about doing what we are doing with WIN and really amplifying the impact can come, but it needs to be more inclusive. And I do hope that APAC does get that voice at the board level to be able to influence and lead as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just the value that an international board seat would bring, personally, I feel like is super valuable for when at large. I've lived in Singapore and Australia, and I'm originally from South Africa, so I very much appreciate the differences in culture and the importance of being able to relate to the different cultures. And I think, especially in the nutraceutical space, the industry is becoming more and more international. And having a woman in Asia, so many ingredients come from India,
Mm.
right? And from the Asia region. Having a woman in the seat there would allow us to learn the nuances between the different countries and the way to communicate, and even, cross border. Um, you know, uh, marketing and trade, it's very different. I think you wrote a fantastic article recently where you illustrated how different it is to bring business to India. And I think you used the example of McDonald's, how McDonald's completely had to change their menu when they went into India. I think they had what was it called? The the sandwiches
The,
they had, the paneer sandwiches, and what is the other
yeah. The
tikka
Mek Aloo Tikki,
Megalo
right?
Tiki. And so what did that look like? So they were, obviously very aware how different, their
Yeah,
products and marketing needed to be in
yeah,
India. So I'd love you to speak a little bit to that, because I think that just that knowledge is
yeah.
super valuable to have.
Yeah, I think McDonald's is such a fascinating story in India because when McDonald's came to India in the early 2000s, if and I had visited McDonald's in the United States, and then you hear it's fancy. It was so fancy in India. Number one. Number two, um, they really changed the menu, right? Because you're talking to a largely predominantly vegetarian population. So the introduction of the Mek Aloo Tikki burger, the Paneer Tikka burger, I think these were not nice to have. These were mandatory for that brand to grow. The brand was the same, right? It's the same McDonald's, the same value system, the same efficiency, the same blueprint for opening one outlet after the other. But there were some aspects of it that had to change. And I don't think somebody sitting in the United States, to put it bluntly, could know how to do this, right? They would have had to have a team here directing that strategy, directing, hey, this is what's really going to work. Research teams, doing focus groups, understanding what the consumer in India wants. And I had used that example to illustrate that it doesn't matter whether it's India, China, Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. I think every country has such a different culture, such a different personality. And to truly win in that country, you have to adapt and you kind of have to. It's like when in Rome, you do things like the Romans. I mean, it's literally that. You have to think like them. And who better to think like them than the local individuals in those countries? And to give you a very silly example, Unilever in India is known as Hindustan in Unilever. For the longest time, even in my adult life, I did not know that it was not an Indian company because everything about it, all its ads, all its people, how it presents itself was so uniquely Indian. I was shocked after, at some point, I think when I did an MBA, I'm like, what? Unilever is not an Indian company? Who knew that? So I think, wearing that skin is very important, and not just wearing that skin for cosmetic reasons, but being in that skin is extremely important. And I think any nutraceutical brand launching their product here has to really think in those lines. We're talking about organizations like Win, but we're also talking about real examples of businesses. Even within India, if I have to go to a certain city, a certain dialect, I have to get to the cultural nuances to get success there. It's not a one size fits all market at all today. We're talking about personalized nutrition. I think there's something about personalized business that
Hmm.
really has to go in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you had sort of a six-step framework on what to consider when you go into the APAC region. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I thought that was really fascinating how you broke it down as far as what you need to do, and one size doesn't fit all when you go into the Asia market.
Yeah. Diesel, you're really putting me on the spot in terms of my memory now. But
Sorry,
but no,
that was a
no,
great
you're fine.
article.
Yeah, no, thank you. But if I remember correctly, it is about specifically looking at get a local team, understand, what that consumer really wants over here. Don't just change the packaging, really, right? Like sometimes even the core product offering needs to change. And I believe I used an analogy borrowed from my software world, right?
Hmm.
Where context is important, not just translation. If I take anything I do and just say, give it to a GPT or any other AI tool and say, just translate it, it's going to translate it. But somebody, and if it's say it's an Indian document to begin with, and somebody in the United States is reading, they want to understand the context, the references. So everything about the way you write needs to change. right? So context becomes extremely important, and understanding that local context becomes very important. The regulatory framework becomes very important. Our ingredients, we really try to create a golden dossier so that my ingredient, the same ingredient works in Japan, in Korea, in Australia. But every country still has a very different framework. Somebody needs my studies to be filed, with the TGA or the KFDA. So understanding these steps early, have will get you success. And creating that dossier for us is extremely important as a company because then I don't have to create multiple SKUs. So if I go with the strictest possible standard and then try to scale it to every country, I'll be in better shape. But still, sometimes excipients can be very different from country to country. So understanding those limits, working with regulatory teams becomes important.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
don't know if I covered all six of the elements, but I covered quite a few, and we can
Yeah, you
always
did.
link the article here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great article. We'll try to link it at the bottom of this podcast as well, because I thought it was fascinating how you described that, and the example of McDonald's of how they changed their uh, methodology of going into India. So that was really fascinating. So, you have a fantastic technology background, and obviously you're deeply ingrained in the ingredient space right now. So, I would love your opinion with how much technology and AI is changing everything right now. What do you see the future of the nutraceutical space look like with the influence of AI?
Oh, I think Time's going to tell a very interesting story about this because today I try to not use AI as my crutch, but really as my sounding board. I use it, I actually abuse it a bit at times, but the advancements are crazy. So in my software world, I was programming, right? And but a few years later, I stopped programming. I had a team of developers, and then I was kind of dependent on this team of developers to understand what I am trying to say and build it. So today, I feel extremely empowered because it's like having an army of developers, and my product developer manager kind of brain still on. So I can ask it, hey, can you design something like this for me? Right from a simple mock-up to an MVP to a finished product. I am getting that done in days' time. And I think that is just unprecedented. One of my own pet projects is really looking at how do I use AI for a couple of things within Nutriventia. One is, of course, for automating systems, right? I really want to make sure that everybody in my company is a thinker. If you were doing something that was just cut and paste, repetitive, something that AI could do today, we need to give it to AI. Like, you don't need to do it. I want to use you in more productive ways. Number two
What
is
what kind of
really
ways would
think.
that be? If you say, have your employees do things with AI and have them use their personal skills more productively. Give me an example of what that would look like.
Absolutely. So let's take an example of somebody in my finance department, or somebody in a sales coordinator role, and sometimes there's a little bit of an overlap there. So when a customer PO comes in, I need somebody with a, um, data entry, sitting and taking all of that data and entering it into my ERP solution so that the process order can be created and the order can be processed further. That really doesn't need to be done. The person can become the checker. The person doesn't have to be the maker anymore.
Mhm.
So anything that's a maker job can kind of go to AI. On the other side of things, if I want to launch on marketing, I want to do account based marketing, but I want to do it at scale. Account based marketing was extremely expensive. I would need an army of graphic designers, people who are creating landing pages, creating campaigns. I can be smart now and kind of use AI to say, can you scale this? This is my thought. This is what I want to do. But I want to be able to do it at scale, create some rules for me so that any lead coming in or any contact, this is my target, account that I want to go after. How do we get that entire engine flowing? So my team's still the ones that are deciding what the campaign needs to be, what the text needs to be. And now this engine is kind of completely automating it. And they can move on to the next campaign or the
Mhm.
new task to be able to increase their productivity. So I think the number one jump we are going to see is in productivity. And especially for small companies like us, we are still 6 years, about 6 years old in the industry. So we do not have unlimited resources,
Mhm.
right? So it gives me now an equal playing field with somebody who may have a lot more resources to compete in the market. So it's really up to me on how to convert that into a real win. And a couple of things that I'm also thinking that, can if I'm a science-backed brand, I have an entire clinical library. Can I make that available with all of my, FDA notified claims so that my customer can go and think about, their teams can search, find the information. So don't tell this to my customers yet because this is not ready. But I truly believe this is going to make a difference for our company. I mean, it is yet to be tested, but to run this experiment in the past, I would have had to spend lots of money on a tool, build it, test it, then maybe nobody used it. Today, I can run this experiment really quickly, see how it scales, and make it available to customers. And hopefully, they love it. And if they do, that improves my business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for any business, scaling is really the key to success, right? And I think
Yeah.
especially with your background, having the deep knowledge and experience in systems, I think is a huge asset. And I think being able to use that with AI is just, a superpower. So let's just go back to win, because obviously that's on everybody's mind right now and the board election. So if you were to be elected on the board, what else do you bring to the table as far as your experience is concerned, and what are some of the changes that you would like to help create at Win if you did have a board seat?
So, number one is I bring a lot of emotional quotient to the table. And I think that's important when you're building. I think, and I've actually learned that with my partner in APAC and Win, building a culture that can sustain the test of time, right? And I've given this analogy in the past of, when can this be this beautiful tree, right? It doesn't matter where it stands. It's not going to grow tall because of that, but it's really going to strengthen and grow tall because it has deep roots. So, deepening those roots, creating a culture that can work across geographies becomes very important. So, I do want to have a hand and emphasize on being able to do that so that as we grow, as we onboard more countries, as we get more and more global, the character, the person doesn't change, right? It's like that inner thought and purpose for why one started kind of remains intact. So that's one of the things I talked about. My systems mindset, and I'm not overstating. If you give me a problem, my first solution is what tech, what can solve. So right now, for instance, we've had trouble in Australia for members to sign on because of the payment gateway. Can we find a solution for that? So there are small, small, tiny problems that really can be solved via technology that can drive membership, that can drive growth. And number three is, like I said, is bringing that cultural mindset to the table, understanding how can we represent really well all the different countries, everything that they need, and launch programs that are meaningful in these geographies and give the members something that truly moves the needle for them here. Because at the end of the day, the goal is the same. We all want gender diversity at the top because we all know our industry will grow. It's about kind of making the pie bigger if we were able to do that. And we cannot ignore APAC, which is one of the largest growing region in our industry. So the future is growing here, and it really needs to be serviced and taken well care of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just a global awareness that, someone in APAC would bring uh, to the organization, I think is super valuable. And I wish you all the best in the election process over the next few days.
Thank
This
you,
was such a
Lisa.
fascinating conversation, Rajat. I really appreciate all your amazing insights. I wish we had a whole nother hour to chat about that. And I would love to have you on the podcast again in the future and maybe talk more deeply about doing business in India and in Asia, especially specifically to the nutraceutical space and all the other things that you're working on. So thank you very much for your time. If anyone wants to connect with you and learn more about Nutriventia or the other things that you're working on, what is the best way for them to contact you?
The best way to contact me is by connecting with me on LinkedIn and dropping me a message. And of course, my email is rajat@nutriventia.com. You can visit Nutriventia at www.nutriventia.com. And very importantly, Liesel, if I have this 2 seconds, also saying that it's for all of the WIN members watching this, it's extremely important to vote. You've kind of heard what I had to say, take an opportunity to hear what others have to say and cast your choice. If you are already a member, visit the Women in Nutraceuticals portal and cast your vote there. And if you're not a member yet, do join. It's a beautiful organization that can give you a lot of purpose and a platform to bring about change like it has done for me. So do become a member and cast your vote then.
Yeah,
And thank you
absolutely.
so much, Lisa, for having me. And I do wish I can join again. It's been very natural, organic, and nice talking to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll definitely schedule another podcast and, delve more into what else you're doing. And again, yeah, WIN is a fantastic organization. It's easy to join, and there's so many different resources and events, both in the US and globally. So if you're not a member, please check it out and vote. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you for tuning into Leading for Wellness. This podcast is powered by Leading for Wellness CEO and Investor Events and Kalon Executive Search. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on your favorite social media platform. And to learn more about our services, visit leadingforwellness.com or colonsearch.com and follow us on Instagram as well.